This is Ryan Miller. He is the co-designer of the Lorcana trading card game. This video will feature some of his most interesting past game design work, but unfortunately, considering how many things he's had his hands on, I can't go over everything in this one video. If we can get this video to 20 likes, I'll release a part 2 going over some more of Miller's keen eye for good game design. But with that, I won't delay the start any further. I'm Illumineer Greg, and I'll be your host for this episode. This is the Lorcana Ryan Miller Retrospective. There is an abundance of reasons to be excited about the upcoming Lorcana trading card game. It may be the excitement of duking it out with your friends with characters from your favorite Disney franchises. Or what about the incredible art, reminiscent but still distinct from Disney's unique filmography? It could even be as simple as finding a new game to play and experience during your weekends. All of these reasons are valid enough to appreciate the game on its own, but my number one reason to be excited about this game is a bit more personal. You see, the co-designer for Lorcana is a man named Ryan Miller, a TCG industry veteran who has plenty of experience working for Wizards of the Coast. He was the lead designer for Duel Masters, an anime-inspired MTG-like that actually fixes some of Magic the Gathering's major design flaws. And speaking of Magic, he also has worked for that game too. Miller helped create the framework for one of the most popular Magic Gathering products of all time with the original Commander pre-constructed decks, otherwise incredibly designed booster sets like Future Sight and Core Set 2013, and an infinitely engaging way to expand pre-existing formats with Planechase. That alone is already enough for me to get excited for this game, but get this, his resume doesn't even stop there. He later collaborated with Bandai to work on the now discontinued Chrono Clash system, with design elements so inventive it was later copied and pasted onto a USB drive and carried over to be the foundational elements for the incredibly popular Digimon card game released stateside in early 2021. Prodigious! There are other interesting footnotes in the career of Ryan Miller, which are honestly way too much for the scope of this one video. However, with the long and influential work-life timeline, I can assure you that there are no doubts in my mind that he will pull through to create an incredibly engaging rulebook as we play characters and challenge our way to victory, in the same way that the rules and scenarios created by the game itself will challenge us as we work through difficult scenarios in game theory. This is why I said my excitement for the game is a little bit more personal. Whether I knew it at the time or not, I've already played with and experienced a variety of Miller's products and ideas for an extended period of time. Like most enfranchised card game players, I too have duked it out with friends staying up late with Commander, and I've even played the Digimon trading card game semi-competitively for about a year. Also, admittedly in a more abstract sense, I appreciate what Duel Masters has done to the landscape of trading card games in general. I look up to Miller a lot for his ingenuity and his ability to create well-constructed gameplay mechanics with a shocking amount of variety throughout his resume. And, of course, I would be amiss if I didn't mention Miller's co-designer on the project, Steve Warner. While less expansive in comparison to Ryan Miller's resume, there still is plenty of successful work history here. The Commander products make a return again in this video, this time with Warner as a designer for the 2013 line of offerings featuring popular commanders, even still to this day, like Derevi, Imperial Tactician, and Prosh, Sky Raider of Kur. Holy moly, remember when these decks retailed $29.99? Warner's resume continues with help on developing Dissension, Shadowmoor, Zendikar, and Core Set 2012. These are all 4 great sets in their own right, but I really wanted to hone in on Zendikar. I don't think I'm exaggerating when I say this, but this set may be one of the most influential Magic sets of all time, with hands down the best land cycle, incredible archetype defining aggro cards like Goblin Guide, and an all-around great and memorable mechanics featuring the backbone of the entire game, lands. Zendikar is truly something special. Lastly, and perhaps most promising of all, is Steve Warner's involvement in the Future League of testing and research and development. According to the Magic the Gathering wiki, the Magic the Gathering Future League is an internal playtest league in Magic R&D that attempts to test and predict what Magic the Gathering and the metagame will be like a year from now. If Steve Warner's past involvement at Wizards of the Coast is any indication, his role will effectively be for game balance, which will be instrumental in making Lorcana the best trading card game it can possibly be. Unfortunately, this type of commitment to quality typically goes by unnoticed, as identifying problems with something is a lot easier than appreciating the nuance that these cards must have gone through in R&D. In fact, Ryan Miller alludes to this idea as well. In a The Gamer article talking about the staff behind Lorcana, Miller describes Steve Warner in the following way. "That guy is like a surgeon. He finds the problem and he cuts them out. He and his team have absolutely knocked it out of the park with the sets." So yeah, the wonderful game of Lorcana will not be there in its finished state without the incredible work and talent of Warner and his team. I already have a great sense of an idea that he did a fantastic job with this first set of cards and beyond. Unfortunately, with his role more as a game balancer and a more limited resume, I can't say too much more about Steve Warner in this video, but rest assured, once I get my hands on some Lorcana decks and sufficiently playtest and think about the game balance, I will revisit his work in the future. Alright, back to Miller. This leaves me wondering, if we take a look at the past of Ryan Miller, does this lead us to any safe assumptions we can make about Lorcana? In other words, are there any common design elements from Miller's past work that should see a return in Lorcana? What if we already know more about Lorcana than we actually think? But in order to make any of those assumptions, we need to dive deeper into these games, including Ryan Miller's long-standing work and common design elements present throughout. We'll begin with Miller's very first work for Wizards of the Coast in the early 2000s, Duel Masters. While not on the market for very long in either attempt at releasing this game in the West, Duel Masters is still alive and kicking in Japan. This game involves cards as your life points, any card from your hand as a resource, and lots of cool monsters to collect and battle with. Let's go over a quick sample game. Teaching all the rules of the game will likely be a whole video by itself, so this video will just go over the basics. I'll be using footage from a channel I'm a big fan of called TCG Academia, so if you wish to see the entire explanation of the rules, this video is linked in the description. To begin the game, you take 5 cards from the top of your deck face down as your life. Then, draw 5 cards from your deck to your hand. There are no mulligans in this game. At the start of the turn, you draw a card. However, the first player does not get to draw. Then you may commit one of the cards in your hand as a mana. This is denoted by playing the card upside down. Once the card is in your mana area, you may turn the card 90 degrees to pay for the cost of the cards. This is by far the coolest part about Duel Masters, and actually fixes a major flaw within the other game released before by the same company, Magic. If you have ever played even a little bit of Magic, you would know that the most cumbersome part about the game is finding too many land cards or not enough land cards. This is because the cards that produce resource for you are slotted and shuffled into the deck, making it somewhat of a gamble if you even see them at all. The point being, sometimes in Magic you draw opening hands where you will lose the game no matter what decisions you make. In Duel Masters, that issue has been completely eliminated. Every card can be a resource. There are no longer games where you just can't play your cards, and it is this system that makes Duel Masters a highly influential card game and why we have seen similar ways of paying for cost of cards in other games. Alongside this resource system, there's also an interesting way to take damage. In this game, if your opponent successfully deals damage to you, you take one of the cards in your life and look at it. If the card has a shield trigger, you may perform its effects. If not, the card goes to your hand. And those are the basics. You keep on going until someone has 0 life. Then you must attack one more time for victory. Duel Masters, in my opinion, sets the stage for what a non-Magic the Gathering card game can look like. It blends tons of unique mechanics and charm together. Not only that, but it would later be used as a framework for many other trading card games in the future, including a much more recent card game released just a year or 2 ago, depending on the region you're in. Welcome to the section where we talk about the Digimon card game. Before we begin though, I want to be clear on how Digimon is related to Ryan Miller. Interestingly enough, the very popular and critically acclaimed Memory Gauge did not originate from Digimon. It actually comes from another Bandai card game that Ryan Miller designed called the Chrono Clash system. This system is the exact same in both card games, so I can go over it quickly. In this resource system, your memory starts at 0. When a card gets played, the gauge shifts over by the card's cost. As soon as the gauge goes past 0, the current player's turn is over and the other player's turn begins. What makes this interesting is that there's no real restriction to the cost of cards you can play in a turn. As long as it is your turn, and your opponent won't exceed 10 memory from playing said card, you are free to play whatever. But, on the opposite end of the spectrum, your opponent will be given a lot more resources to work with within the following turn if you play higher costed cards. As far as I can tell, this is the extent of Miller's involvement on the Digimon card game. My best guess is that Chrono Clash did not succeed or pull in the numbers that Bandai wanted, but still recognized how clever this system really was, so they ported it over to another, hopefully more profitable endeavor. And it seemed like this move has worked. According to an ICV2 article, it is the 6th best-selling game in the United States, beating out competition even as big as Cardfight Vanguard and Flesh and Blood. I also wasn't kidding when I said Duel Masters would serve as inspiration for future card games, as design elements from that game can also be seen in the Digimon game a full 20 years later. Remember the Life Shield system used in Duel Masters? It's back. The only difference is when you swing into the life, you compare your Digimon's power to the opponent's card they just revealed. If their power is greater to or equal to your own Digimon's power, your card gets removed from the field. There is no doubt about it. The memory system featured in Digimon and Chrono Clash is nothing short of perfection. It creates a real limit for how long your turn can last, and also created an incredibly interesting tempo structure between you and your opponent. If I leverage this high cost spell now, can I manage what my opponent may be able to do with all the memory? Or should I stay low to the ground and just give them one memory to work with on the following turn? What if I take a middle road with something that doesn't cost too much or too little? It's these kind of questions that really incentivize using this resource system to your advantage and thinking about all the options on any given turn. I wanted to dedicate this last section of the video to talking about the interesting things Miller has done for Magic the Gathering 2, specifically working on the design for Future Sight and Planechase. We'll start with Future Sight. Being the third set in the Time Spiral block and released in 2007, Future Sight aims to take a detour from the previous two sets in the block and attempts to look into the future, as it were. This set doesn't look at the future, but also several different potential futures, including a bunch of new introduced mechanics. This leaves design space for if Wizards of the Coast plans to return to these elements in the future. The prime example of the set looking into the future is a card called Tarmogoyf, a multi-format all-star that references Planeswalkers by name in its card text. The catch being that Planeswalkers did not yet see print when Tarmogoyf came out. This gave players the glimpse into the future that the set name implied. And of course, the potential future aspect of the set could be seen in all of these new mechanics worked on. Some now see mainstay use, like Shroud or Lifelink, but others still have not seen another card with the same mechanic, like Narcomoeba. It is likely that this type of effect is too powerful, and you could not see more than 4 copies of this type of card in your deck, so a similar ability has not been seen since. I encourage those interested in Future Sight to give the set another look. There's tons of cool lore and design space opened up, and it's just another one of the many things Ryan Miller has had his hands on. And finally, there's Planechase. Think of Planechase like DLC for any existing Magic the Gathering format. You have 10 cards set aside as a plane deck, and the starting player flips one over at the start of the game. These planes give a static effect to the board and stays put until a player planeswalks. To planeswalk, you roll a die. If the die is blank, nothing happens, but if it lands on the planeswalker symbol, you flip over the next card in your plane deck and the currently active plane goes to the bottom of the previous player's plane deck. You can also hit the chaos symbol on a die roll, and in that instance, you read the text on the plane with the chaos symbol and perform its effects. As I said before, it's like DLC for any Magic format, but a great way to add additional flavor to any game. And with that, I hope you can truly see the diversity in the things Ryan Miller has worked on, and why I'm personally so very excited for Lorcana's release in late 2023. Personally, I believe the biggest thing that Ryan Miller knows how to do well is create and refine an incredible resource system. We can see this present in both Duel Masters and Digimon. Both of these games create interesting ways to interact with the game, your resources, and your opponent. Thanks so much for watching today's video. I can't wait to see you again at the Traverse Tavern. Stay tuned, and until next week, take care.